Hey friends, are you tired of spending hours hand pollinating things like your squashes or your cucumbers or your tomatoes? Well, I am too. And so today we are going to talk about a way to get effortless pollination, and it all comes down to the pollinators. When I first started gardening, I found that whenever I was growing things like these squashes behind me, the fruit would start and then it would completely dry out, turn black, and drop from the plant. And I thought to myself, like, what is the problem here? I quickly figured out that they were not being pollinated. And the reason behind that was because I didn't have enough pollinators in my garden. So I learned how to hand pollinate. And if you haven't seen that video, I'm going to put that down into the description below to help you out with pollination. But after many years of hand pollinating, I'm kind of sick of doing it. You have to race out in the morning with your little paintbrush and try to hit all the plants, and it just has been kind of an annoying task. I'd like to get rid of that task. So the way that I'm doing that this season in my garden is I'm adding plants that the pollinators like, and I have to tell you, in just one season, they have all shown up. And I have not pollinated lots of things. For example, let me show you. Right here, I have some watermelons. I have another one right there. Across the way. I have two right there. Then you can see some squashes over there. Another watermelon coming in right here. And then across the way again, we're going to see the cantaloupe. Along with several other watermelons in this bed alone, and all of that was pollinated by the bees. So one way that I did this was I added a lot of flowers. Now, I'm not a huge flower person, so this was an adjustment for me, but I've come to love them, not just because of the pollinators, but because, guys, look at this. They're beautiful. These right here, right behind me, let me get down so you can see. This beautiful burst of red flowers over here are my zinnias. These are a giant zinnia. I also have, right over here, one of my favorites. This beautiful purple zinnia, purple fuchsia zinnia. Love that one. And then down here on the corner of my bed, I've added a couple other things. I have some sweet asilium right here. And then way over there, I have marigolds, calendulas, all kinds of stuff. Also, right over here, I'm trying to find unique places to put them so that they don't interfere with my growing of my vegetables, but that, I can attract bees. Over here underneath Peachy, I put a bunch of marigolds. Now this is going to help with two things. One, I'm hoping that if there is a nematode population, that I'm kind of encircling Peachy so that way it doesn't affect her. And then also, the bees really love the marigolds. One of the other ways that I'm attracting pollinators, besides the flowers, is what's happening right here. Ooh, sorry. It's a predator. It's a wasp, which most of us are concerned with keeping wasps in our garden, but they are a predatory animal, and so they do kill off some of the bad bugs, and they like the flowers too. So let me show you what I got going on here. I'm growing this huge patch of parsley, and I grew these for my swallowtails, and they showed up and they laid babies, and those babies ate it a bunch, but clearly you can see that they did not really, they left a lot. But the one thing that I'm doing, I'm letting this parsley go to seed. Look at the wasp. You see him? They love it. The bees, the wasps, all kinds of insects are all over this. And so I've let it go to seed. It looks a little wild and crazy. I did that over here as well. These guys have died out now. These were my Chigemisai and my Tokyo Becana. I let all that go to seed, and that's done now. The flowers are gone, the seed pods are gone. So right now, the pollinators are getting more of the activity from over there with the plants that are flowering, like the parsley over here. In my green stalks, I've allowed my dill to go to seed. I don't know if you can see that tiny little bee right there. The tiniest little bee. It is so cute. So that's the dill that I went ahead and let go to seed. And then over here, I have the bee balm that I'm collecting for medicinal properties of the flowers. And then over here, I have the pineapple sage that's flowering as well. So all those things are helping with the pollinators. And this one right here, I can't remember for the life of me what that is. I have no idea what I planted. So if you guys know, please head to the comments and let me know. But that is flowering as well. And then in my little mini orchard, I don't have very much flowering, but I do have one thing flowering that the bees seem to like quite a bit. Right here is an elderberry, and it is flowering beautifully, and it is attracting lots of different bugs and bees. See those flowers up there? I don't think it's setting fruit. Like, I can see what's happening right here, but I don't know. I think I need to get another plant. I'm going to go ahead and let it continue to go and see what happens. The only fruit bush I have going on right now is my blackberries. Check out those blackberries. You can see that this one's almost ripe. We had one last night and they were outstanding. Maybe not as productive as mulberries, of course, but still really good. And they did produce a lot of flowers, and the flowers attracted a lot of the pollinators. And at this point, the flowers are gone. So it's not really attracting the bees anymore, but if you see over here, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it in the video, but there are these predatory bugs that are kind of hanging around it. But the other thing I did that was by far the best thing that I did for the pollinators was I brought in some native plants. It started with an impromptu visit to a local native nursery, and I just kind of bought whatever I thought was pretty. A lot of those went into the front yard. I haven't had a chance to show you guys that yet. I had done a video with Jacqueline. Unfortunately, that video became corrupted, so I have to redo that video. I'm not sure how that's going to work out just yet. But I had bought a bunch of plants, one of which are right over here. These black-eyed Susans behind me. I'm still trying to figure out where to put these, but I did find a place to put a couple of them, which I'm going to show you. But that is a native plant. Another native plant, and this was at the advice of Jacqueline, is this corky stem passion vine. It prefers like a shadier spot, so we're going to put that over here, my most shady spot of the garden. She came over and we did a video together. It's on her channel. I'm going to put a link down below where she gave me a lot of really great advice on what kind of native plants I should put in my garden. And I went back to Wilcox, which is the native nursery kind of near me, an hour and a half near me. And I picked up a bunch of the plants that she mentioned. Let me show them to you. That one right there is a starry rosenweed. And then that tiny one right in front, here's a bigger one right here. Those are coreopsis. And behind them are 3 swamp milkweeds. And the cool thing is immediately upon them showing up, I believe, and you guys head down to the comments and tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, but I believe that those are monarch eggs. I did see monarch caterpillars just a few days ago, and some of them were really, really tiny, and some of them were quite large, like close enough to be in their chrysalis stage where they were going to go into it, but then they disappeared. So I don't know if they're just hiding from me or if all of the other activity that has been going on in here with the butterflies and the birds and everything else has caused them to become food for those guys. which is unfortunate. But we still have a ton of the eggs on these plants, so I'm very hopeful that I'll get some more monarchs through here. But I was really just incredibly shocked with how quickly they showed up. It's a little early in the morning right now, so the butterflies aren't really here yet, but I'll show them to you later on once they do get here. The butterflies are all over my garden, and I can't identify them as well as Jacqueline can with the wild Floridian, but there are a few. I've seen the sulfur, the white sulfur. I've seen the zebra longwing, which I'm stoked about. I've seen monarchs, of course, swallowtails. I've seen all kinds of butterflies, and even more that I can't name, like this little tiny orange one. I don't know what it is. I think it's a Gulf flitterary. I'm not sure. I'm learning. But anyway, seeing all of those, including tons of bees, these little, I can't describe them. They're almost like a metallic-y looking bee, and then these giant fat black bees. I've seen the little tiny black bees. I've seen so many different kinds of black bees in the last 3 months since I put the flowers in. I let things go to seed, and I started bringing these native flowers in. So my first step with bringing in the native flowers once I got them home from the nursery was I wanted to arrange them in some sort of pretty fashion. We are not just about growing our own food and helping the wildlife, but there's a sense of we like things to look good, my husband and I. So it's symmetry, it's matching colors and those kinds of things. So what you see me doing right here is I'm trying to arrange these in some kind of way where they're going to be symmetrical. So what I ended up deciding to do was the starry rosin weeds I put in like a diamond or a triangle form on either end. So there's 6 total plants, 3 on each side. And then I put the salt and pepper right in the middle as like the statement piece. And then in between the starry rosin weed and the salt and pepper plant, I put the 3 milkweeds. And then after that, I just line the front with the little tiny coreopsises. And the reason why I thought this might look good is because the starry rosin weeds should be yellow, and then the swamp milkweed should be pink. The salt and pepper is white and black, and then we'll have more milkweeds and then more starry rosin weed, and then along the front, lining the front, will be the coreopsis, which should be yellow. So we're going to have this yellow, pink, black, and white kind of spell of flowers. So my first step with getting them planted is I need to dig the holes. Now I did prep this bed before I put the plants in, so we're putting in this starry rosin weed right here, but I prepped the bed by pulling out some of the native sandy soil, and I top dressed it with some compost. And then so right now I just dug a hole big enough for that plant to go in, and since it already had the compost on top, I'm just kind of pushing that compost that I pulled out right back in to fill up the sides so that the plant doesn't have any gaps. I'm planting it at ground level, and then I'm just going to push the mulch back over into place. Once I've got it secured in there well and the mulch is covering again, I'm just going to water it in really good. Thankfully, we got a rainstorm right after I planted these, so they really anchored in nice and tight. This was a project that I wasn't super thrilled about doing because it was a solid 95 degrees that day, and it was a very high humidity. I don't know if it was 100%, but it was really close, and I was just sweating. You guys know I don't do big projects. Thankfully, this wasn't like a huge project. This planting probably took me maybe an hour and a half. It wasn't that bad. I think it was worse on my husband when he had to dig out all the grass and dig out a lot of the dirt and put down, the compost. He did all that for me in the very early morning hours. He's a sweetheart when it comes to the garden. I am very blessed to have him and very grateful that he likes to help me with things in the gardens. You're not going to really see him on camera because he's not really into that, but trust me, he helps with a lot of the big jobs. I am blessed. And there it is. That's what it looks like all filled in. And hopefully in not too long I should be able to show you what they look like once they are flowering. I expect most of these are going to be flowering very, very soon. Now let me tell you about the one that I'm most excited about, which is silly because there's so many great native plants, but this one I am just so ecstatic about because it brings back childhood memories. So this particular area is all rocked in because we had some issues with irrigation and sand, so we put pavers in and rocked it in. So I decided to put in one of these very large half-barrel pots, and I'm planted in here 2 black-eyed Susans. I need to trim them back because they're a little bit wild, but this is my pride and joy. This is the coral honeysuckle that I'm putting kind of in the back. I am going to be putting in I think it's called an obelisk. It's a type of like triangular tower looking trellis that I'm going to establish right on top of the coral honeysuckle so it has a chance to climb up that. And I'm going to place it right in front of this window because I think that it's going to look so pretty once it's all full grown. In order to get this guy planted, I first started by putting some potting soil, and then I took some of the extra dirt that was in the flower bed that we just planted all the other natives that we had dug out. I put some of that native dirt in there, and then I placed the plants just to see what they would look like and if I liked that, and I think I do. It might be a little bit too many plants for this area, but my goal is to keep the black-eyed Susans smaller than what they are now. I'm just giving them a chance to get established before I start cutting them back, and I'm hoping that, you know, this big container and keeping them cut back will allow all 3 plants to grow. But if they start to show a struggle, I'll probably pull the black-eyed Susans out and just leave the coral honeysuckle. And so now that I have them in place and they are just slightly an inch above the pot line, I'm going to add the rest of the potting soil into it and then place the pot. After that, it's just about watering, and because this is such a large container, it did take me quite a few minutes to water this entire thing. So you're probably like, why is a coral honeysuckle your pride and joy? Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little story. Growing up, my husband and I actually grew up in the same neighborhood. We're kind of childhood sweethearts. And there was a house in the neighborhood that we lived in that had a coral honeysuckle all the way across this hedge, right? It was growing across this entire hedge. And when we would take our little walks, because that's what we did back in the 90s, we would just take walks around the neighborhood as friends with our bikes and all that other stuff. And every time we'd go by there, I would stop and admire it and just think how beautiful. And I absolutely loved coral honeysuckle. And I didn't really know much about it, but I remember as a young girl loving coral honeysuckle. So I've been trying to figure out a place in my garden where it would work, because it is a vining plant and I don't really have a lot of vining opportunities here. So when Jacqueline came over and I asked her, could I put coral honeysuckle in a pot? She said yes. It probably won't live that long. It's not going to live as long as it would if it wasn't in a pot. But I should be able to propagate it, and I should be able to keep a coral honeysuckle for a very long time to come, which makes my heart very happy. It's nostalgic. All of this increased diversity, especially the native plants, have really upped the pollinators. I can come out into my garden at any time during the day, except maybe super late at night. But if I come out anytime during the day, these pollinators are hard at work. I've done a little bit of hand pollinating with the cucumbers and with the squash, but really not a lot. And I've had probably the most impressive harvest I've ever had, certainly from the watermelons. I believe that I've counted 10 watermelons at this point. My squashes, for having one winter squash plant, I have like 5 fruits off of it. It's crazy to me. Cucumbers, I had so many that at this point I'm like, okay, maybe I should just pull the cucumber plant down. It has been pretty astonishing to me that just by bringing in a few natives, not a lot, you saw I picked just a one flower bed size worth of area to put in some of these natives, and that was all it took. I started some zinnias and some marigolds and some calendula, which are super easy flowering plants to start. I'm certainly not an expert at growing flowers yet. Not an expert at all. Basic beginner over here. But by doing those few things, just adding a couple flowers in between on my blank spots and putting in a small area in my backyard for the natives, whether that's in a pot or in the ground, has changed the game for me. I will forever be a fan of native Florida plants, or any native where you live. They are going to help with pollination. So if you've been struggling with pollination, definitely get out there, find a couple spots in the garden, even if it's in pots, to put those plants, because they are just going to naturally attract the pollinators that you need for your vegetable garden. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to watch more of my videos, I'm going to pop them up here, including the one with Jacqueline where she gave me a full consultation about the native plants in my garden. I hope that you enjoyed spending this time with me today. Happy gardening, guys.